Okay, so we're gonna pretend that you can't see how messy my room is right now because it's very messy and I need to do laundry. But I wanted to give you an update. It has been a few months, well no, a month? It's been a month or so since I started looking into fighting, longsword. And I talked about the SCA, and I did join the SCA, and I've gone to a couple events, and I've started going to practices. So the martial practice is actually conveniently close to my house, and they do basically sword-based fighting, which we'll get to this in a second. But yes, I've gone to like 3 rapier practices so far, and 2 or 3, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 longsword practices so far, which has been really cool, and I've learned so much. I have learned that I prefer longsword over rapier. The thing with rapier, it's one-handed, which if you think about modern fencing, how it's all very much like you're in this sort of a pose, right? And you know, you do like these like crossing steps because you're trying to keep your sword arm closest to your partner, because if you're here, then you're a lot closer to them than they are to you. Or yeah, they can hit you easier than you can hit them because like your reach isn't as far. So you want to be like this and have your sword in between you and them, which is a very particular fighting style. And they also start with just thrusting, right? Because it's, you know, rapier, right? And they do have a second sort of, I don't know if I want to call it a level, but after thrusting, you can start to do cut and thrust, which is where you can also do percussive blows. And that requires a lot more armor, and you have to like authorize at a higher level in order to be able to actually spar in tournaments, like prove you can do it safely. But like, it's just not my vibe. Like, the writing that I do tends to focus on eras that are like pre that, when they have sword fighting, like more like knights and longswords kind of time frames. Like, that's kind of more what I lean towards, and I like that better. It is really cool in rapier how they do like offhand weapons, so like you can learn to fight with a rapier and a dagger, or a rapier and a cloak, or a rapier and a buckler or something like that. But it's just, I don't know, it doesn't ring quite as authentically what I'm trying to emulate, what I find the most helpful for my writing. So I started learning longsword instead, and this is a little bit more intense, because, you know, it's obviously cut and thrust. You can't really just do thrusting longsword. Like, I guess you technically could, but it'd be kind of dumb. So longsword is 2 hands, of course, and it's a lot of cuts and not as much thrusting. Like, there is some thrusting, of course, but like, it's percussive blows. And in the SCA, with doing longsword, you have 2 main kind of entry levels, or that were shown to me. Either I could go heavy fighting and go with rattan, or rattan, I think it's rattan, and you have to wear like full armor, and then you can sort of like wail on each other a little bit harder, but they tend to be a little bit less focused on the historical reenactment part of it, like the like actually trying to do like really popular techniques from manuals, and it's more on the like sparring focus side of it, which like makes sense. Not that you can't do both, but the steel longsword fighting is a little bit different. So it's steel fighting, so steel swords, not foam swords. Like, they actually look like real longswords. They are sort of essentially real longswords, but they're not sharpened on the edges. The edges are blunt, and the tip is like has a cover over it, so you're not gonna actually like pierce through someone. But it's very, very interesting. You have more armor requirements fighting with steel longsword than you do fighting with rapier, obviously, because it's percussive cuts and the longsword is bigger, it's heavier, it's longer, you get more momentum behind it. You can do a lot more damage, in theory, with a longsword than you can with a rapier, but less so than rattan fighting, or less so than heavy fighting. It's still considered in the like light armored category, or the like, I think they technically still call it like rapier. It's just like, it goes like regular rapier, then cut and thrust rapier, and then longsword. And there's more armor requirements, like you need to have back of the head protection, you need to have more layers of armoring and stuff like that, but it's not full armor. Like, I think you can get away if you wear like elbow pads, a helmet, proper, you know, groin protection and all that. Like, if you just have a few layers of linen, like a historical gambeson kind of thing, that's enough. And the reason is because you're supposed to not hit as hard as you can. And I thought this was actually very interesting because in a lot of books, right, where people are learning how to fight and they're like, you know, the damsel is being escorted by her new guards, one of which is, of course, her, you know, sexy love interest. And she's like, I'm gonna learn how to fight with a sword. Or like, you know, they teach her how to fight with a sword. And then like 3 scenes later, she's like holding her own in a battle. Yeah. I have a few issues with that, which I'm gonna go into like main misconceptions I've kind of had debunked already in another video because it's kind of like a whole thing, but like you need to wear a lot of armor for this stuff because you can really hurt each other. Like even with rapier, like even with like the blunted tips where it's like padded and there's like leather over it and stuff, thrusting with that, if you put all your weight behind it with the armor requirements and the safety requirements on the rapier swords, you could break someone's ribs. Like 100% you could do that. And with longsword, it's even heavier. So like the percussive blows have a lot more power behind them. And so like you can really hurt somebody. Like if you hit someone in the hand when you're fighting and if they're not wearing full gauntlets, which wearing full gauntlets, it sounds weird now that I say it out loud. But wearing full gauntlets is required, but if you were to fight without those and someone hits your hand, like your hand would probably break just because it's like thick steel hitting your hand. Like your hand would break. And so you don't get to spar as quickly with longsword because you need to learn all the movements and you need to learn how to hit in a way where you're not putting that much force into it. Like normally if you were like actually going to try to kill someone, like you'd be in like, say you're doing like a downward cut, right? You'd be trying to send your sword all the way through their body, like in terms of momentum. Like you'd be trying to hack into them as much as you can, right, in theory. So like you'd be going from like here to here. But typically they say that you should be aiming to go towards like long point, which is basically like just directly at them. So you kind of want to get to them and then stop. Like that's all you're trying to do, not all the way through. So it's not obviously as historically accurate as literally trying to murder people, but that's the vibes I want, right? Like I want to be able to literally learn the moves in the manuals that they were learning and understand how fights like that happened. And it's been so cool. Like I have learned so much, like how long it takes to learn it, the types of things you're learning at the beginning, the type of mistakes newbies are gonna make, how absolutely dumb it is to be sparring without full armor on. Like dumb, so dumb. It is so easy to hurt yourself. And just like all of this stuff. But my point here right now, what I'm trying to do is, this was loaned to me by one of the people at the practice, and it's just like a, you know what this is. If you know, you know. It's just like a foam sword, but it actually has edges, which my little practice swords do not. And she lent me this, which I don't know if you can see it, but like it's just like a wood board with a little like thing in it, and then this like wooden pole sits in it. And the idea is that you want to practice your cuts with hitting something so that you can kind of understand the concept of stopping. And also when you're sparring, you are not ever going to be just swinging all the way through, right? You're either going to be hitting their body or their sword or something like that. Like you're very rarely going to just swing your sword and not hit anything, so you shouldn't practice doing that. So I have this to practice. And the other thing with this is, if you hit it hard enough, you just knock the whole thing over, which I hope I don't do because it would hit my TV, I think. So maybe I'll scoot it over a little bit so I don't risk hitting my TV. But if you hit it hard enough that the base kind of comes up, that's sort of the edge of pressure of how hard you can hit someone with a steel sword without causing them a lot of damage. Like that'll still hurt and that's probably a little too hard, but like it's sort of in game. So ideally you want to try and learn how to do the cuts without knocking it over or knocking the base up. So we want to be safe. But since I'm going to be going through and doing some practicing today, I thought I would sort of show you some of the stuff that I've learned because it's very fun. So I'm going to kind of refresh my memory and go through all the stuff that I've learned, and then I will kind of show you a little bit. Alright, so I don't know how well you can like see me at all right now. Let me push this down a little bit, but then you're going to see more of my laundry. Okay, so it's fine. So there's a series of main guards and then like side guards. And the book that I'm learning right now in the SCA is German longsword, which a lot of the guards are very similar to like Italian longsword, but there's a few differences. But you sort of learn one, you can learn a couple others, and then you can start to mix them. And like my form is not great yet, so don't like rate me on that. So you have Vomtag, right, which is this side guard. It's my favorite so far. I really like it. You have Ox. You have Albert, which is this like general like center mid point, and then you have Fool's Guard, which is down here, and then the like secondary guards are, let's see, like a short point. I can't remember what the actual word for it is, but it's like a short point, and then a side point, and then you have tail, right? Because it's the sword is kind of going behind you like a tail would. And these are guards, and so you would take these positions, like sometimes they're defensive, sometimes they're starting, but a lot of times they're just like transition points. And those were all right side ones. You can do them on the left side too. It just kind of depends on how you're standing. So like Vomtag on the left, and all that. But I really like the idea of you have all these guards that you learn, and then you learn what kind of cuts and what kind of defenses you can make from each guard. And it's kind of like chess, because depending on what position you're in, that tells your opponent which parts of your body are the most undefended and would be the hardest for you to get to. And so like you have to pick your guard based off where their sword is, right? Because you want to be able to defend yourself. And then they will hit attack you in a way to like, throw you off balance or feint or try and actually hit you or something. And it's like you have to keep picking these moves based off like what they're doing and what you're like. It's like playing chess but with swords, and that's not even getting into like binding and winding and all that, which is where your swords actually meet. Because like when you are in a bind, right, which is when your sword meets their sword, you're not gonna just sit here like that, like all those dramatic movies where they catch and they're like, oh, and then they go push back. No, that's not how it works. You get in a bind and you're either strong in the bind or weak in the bind or even, and you're either gonna want to like, you can do different things depending on where you are, and different parts, there's like so much stuff, but different parts of the sword allow you to have different force behind it. So obviously like down here, if their sword is here, you are strong in that bind, this is really close to your hand, you have a lot of leverage. And so if like the tip of their sword, like up near here, is meeting your sword down here, you can out-strengthen them. You have more strength in that bind, right? You're in control of their sword, you can push their sword away. But like if your sword here is in like their middle or the lower end of their sword, you can't control their sword, they control yours. So like if they hit your sword here, you can kind of give into it, right? And let your sword be pushed away and then like come back under or something like that. If you're strong in the bind, then you have the power to force their sword, so you can basically just go like this and stab them because they can't stop your sword, and you push their sword out of the way of protecting them when you do that. And if you're kind of in the middle, you can push your sword up, right? So if their sword's here and you push your sword up so that you're strong in the bind, then you just stab them, right? Like in the head or something. And it's like a chess game. It's like a chess game. It really, really is. It's not just like wildly attacking each other, and like, it's very complicated. And a lot of that is what makes me think that like, that's where experience comes in. Like muscle memory is a big part of it. But it's also just like knowing that based off what they're doing, what is the most advantageous thing that you can do, right? Which is really cool. But so those are all the main guards. So going with like Vomtag, right, which is my favorite. When you cut, right, so like if you cut, you're going to be stepping forward with it in the most part because that helps you like bring your sword forward. because you can sort of move into measure, right, where you can hit them and be in contact with each other, right? But be out here where you're not in measure, they can't hit you. You move into range to hit them, and you keep moving, right? You're not going to just stand still. From here, you have like diagonal cuts, right? You can go, both ways. You can go under. You can go like under that way. Like you can hit any of those diagonals. You can cut like straight down. I guess in theory you could cut straight up, I guess. You can do like a side cut kind of thing to each direction. So like each of those quadrants you can cut from. And obviously, depending on where you hold your sword, and it's sort of your hand that matters, where that is, where your hilt is, you can sort of come at them from different ways. So like obviously if I'm up here, it's going to take me a really long time to drop that and do a like lower cut, right? So like if I'm here and they go for my legs and I'm trying to block them, like trying to get down here to block them is really difficult. But I can do a very powerful downward cut or a very powerful like diagonal, like one of those. If you're like an ox and you switch your hand position here, you can do like a really powerful like sideways cut like that, like right through their head kind of thing, right? So like it all just depends. And like different hand positions, you can't really do certain types of cuts as easily. I think you sort of can, but like it's a lot more difficult. So you have to practice. You have to practice. Okay, so another quick update. I have been taking an official like HEMA longsword beginner class just to get more of a structured environment, because like I'm socially awkward and that works well for me if people just tell me exactly what to do and there's like a structure. And I was looking back to some of the earlier footage in this sort of like learning longsword series, and I've definitely learned a lot more about like the actual names of things, the actual cuts. My form has gotten a lot better. I've learned a lot more footwork. Like it is significantly more intense than I thought it would be. Like if you imagine a intense like martial arts class, it's like that. Like we start by running, which literally first time I've ran in like 5 years. It's amazing. I'm so proud of myself. So you start with running, you do a lot of exercises and warm-ups, you do footwork back and forth across the room a lot, because footwork's really important, both to maintain distance, make sure that you're moving and you can get the right lines. There's a lot about lines in that. And also because you need to make sure that you're not going to lunge or lean or move in a way that's going to hurt your body, because it's really easy to tear your ACL when you're doing sword fighting and stuff like that. So that's been intense. I've made it through most of the class at this point, so I've learned, pretty sure, all of the guards, all of the different cuts, and a lot of them have like fancy moves, like there's like overhow and underhow, and one of them is called like the wrath cut, and like there's just a bunch of names for everything. It's also the German stuff, which I've been enjoying, but I'm gonna need to do a little like demonstration for you at some point. But my goal right now is to actually be able to officially spar. I have not officially sparred yet. I've mostly done like mock sparring, where like you do single pieces of armor and like focus on just repeating a single cut to that part of the body, like head cuts or hand cuts. And I haven't done full body sparring. It's a little bit, it makes me anxious because I'm afraid I'm gonna hurt somebody, because you are responsible for your sparring partner's like safety. Like you are not wearing enough armor to just go all out against them without injuring them. So that makes me anxious, piled along with some of my social anxiety, but it's been very interesting kind of understanding this, the mechanics of it, the flow of it. Like it's so different from what I read in most fantasy novels. There are definitely like some epic fantasy novels where you can tell they're like into that sort of thing and it's really correct, but a lot of them, especially like if you think like the romantasy ones, tend to be pretty inaccurate, and I don't know. I've learned so much, but that's sort of where I am right now. So at the end of the class, there'll be a beginner's tournament, and then I have an event coming up with the SCA, which will have tournaments and sparring and mock battles, I think, which I want to participate in. I want to start to understand that feel of actual sword fighting, and also I decided this is a really great exercise. This is a great thing for me, and I can keep learning this, I can keep learning archery, and it'll all, like, as I learn more about it and get exposed to more of this, it'll just kind of expand my understanding and ability to write these kinds of scenes, and it's fun, and I like it, and it's good exercise, so we're here for it. But I wanted to show you a quick clip from one of my practices where we were doing drills, and we learned a new drill that was to focus on, I guess, over how, oh, I can't remember what they're called, but it's like basically the diagonal cuts where you cut like down across their shoulder, and it combines like 4 of them on one side and then you move to 4 on the other, and it's kind of hard to coordinate them all, and I look really awkward in the video because it's like the first time I did it all together, so excuse that, but I wanted to show you kind of an idea of what that looks like here. But yes, it's been a lot of fun, and I'm learning a lot. Okay, I don't know if you could tell, but I am absolutely disgusting right now. I just got back from practice, and this was my last SCA martial practice, well, second to last before Battle on the Bay, which is like, I'm hoping to get authorized there. So I'm going to do a mock auth next week, and we realized when I was there that in order to do the authorizations, you do it first like for just general thrusting, just general rapier, and then cut and thrust. And technically, I think you could do the whole thing with a longsword, but like, I don't know. And then also at Battle on the Bay, there's not a lot of stuff you can do with the longsword, so it's good if you're like are authorized to also use a rapier, because then you can do more stuff. So I spent the whole evening learning how to spar with rapier, and I'm very sweaty because like you're wearing, like I was wearing this chest protector, long sleeve shirt, and then this like 2-layer linen like coat hardy type thing, gloves, a gorget, fencing mask, hood over the fencing mask, and it's warm. But I did way better than I thought. I don't think I killed anybody, but I took some arms, I took some hands, so that was good, and it's a rapier. One of my very new good SCA friends has lent this to me along with most of her fencing gear, so I have a fantastic rapier here, which, you know, rapier. It's a long boy. I actually just got finished oiling it with olive oil because it was raining when we left, and she was like, you oil it so it doesn't rust, so I very carefully oiled the entire thing, so I have that. At this point, I have everything that I need, so even if I don't finish my stuff that I want to make for it, I have stuff I can use. So like if I can get authorized, can fight at Battle on the Bay, which is very exciting. And I'm actually very excited that I will actually be able to do it with rapier, because there's a lot of cool like mock battle stuff that's like rapier, so I'm very into that. I mostly just wanted to check in. I'm going to be really trying to get a lot of sewing projects done right now because I'm very behind. But first I need to shower because I am legitimately disgusting, so yeah.